All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. We're excited to share with you this morning our Speak Up at School trainings, an overview for families of what our staffs have been engaged in for the school year. Dr. Clifford brought this work to us. And in fact, as I'll share, if you go to the next slide, please. We really decided that dealing with biased language is a critical piece of work that we need to engage in as a staff. And we started together with this work in August. In fact, our very first, when the whole staff comes together, the week before school starts. Everybody ITK through grade 12, bus drivers, paraeducators, teachers, everybody went through this training, and the initial training that Dr. Clifford led us in. It looks different at the elementary school than, of course, it does at the middle and high school. But for us, we really talked about the fact that we have to make sure every single child feels safe at school, and it's an ongoing work, but it's our commitment. Understanding, helping our students understand the power of words. So this is both for our staff to help them to have the kind of courage to interrupt when those kind of, that kind of language is being used, because it's hard sometimes. And for our kids to understand the power of their words and the impact it can have on others. So it's both about how we belong together, as well as what words can do to people. Says, please, what happened down below there, Christy? That's weird. Can you see that band on the bottom?
It must be
Didacted. We didacted the prompt. Well, let me pull my copy up real quick so we can. That's so weird. I think I should have it right here. The prompt was, when we think about belonging, what does that look and sound like? Yay! We blacked out something else, but that's all right. So does anybody have a comment on that prompt as we jump in? What do you think that looks like? Pardon me? No, I just was asking people if anybody had a comment on. Yes, indeed.
to say
Yep.
do that, and I think that
Yep.
I have another kid. Sure, there's a half a dozen or 2 dozen or 5 dozen other kids who do the same thing. They don't understand that their words can hurt. Okay. And they don't just hurt other kids, but they can actually hurt adults too. And so I live this. I think this is extremely important.
Thank you, Todd. I couldn't agree more. Yes, Ashley.
I agree. I love the third bullet down, the proactive approach. So not just the reaction portion of it, but really helping folks understand, kids understand, adults understand what it means to belong. I also feel very conflicted in many ways, because at our home, we're trying to balance this idea that words matter and also don't let it affect you, and how you phrase that in a way that really makes sense to them, because we want our children to also be okay if someone says something to them that could be hurtful, and be able to move on and know that that doesn't really mean anything. So personally, I need some education on how to really balance that out to where it's
Yeah.
important and it matters, but also, how do we work through not letting this change your mindset and impact you negatively?
And I'm so glad you brought that up, because when we first brought this work to our building leadership team, that conversation came up. How do we both teach them and empower them to say, no, that's not true. I'm not buying that, what you just said to me. So we are going to talk about that today. Yep. Anybody else, Lauren?
Actually this happened last night. My kid's laying in bed. Actually she wanted to sleep in the room with me last night, so she's on a sleeping bag and she's laying there. She's like, Mom, because we just found out that she's gonna have to go back into AFOs, and she's laying there, she's just thinking out loud. She's like, do you think I'm gonna be bullied if I have to wear AFOs? And she's, and it's that thinking of belonging and that sense that these kids sit there and they think, well, if I make this change, am I going to be accepted for making this change? And what things, and she's 9. 9-year-olds are thinking about if they wear this shirt or they wear these shoes. And we talked about it, obviously, and I brought about how, if you have AFOs and they bully you, chances are they're going to bully you. If you didn't have them, they'll find a reason to bully a kid, just because that's just sometimes how it is. And we talked about just, making friends and building connections. And that's the best, that's how I figured out the best way to combat bullying and belonging is just to make as many connections with all the other kids as possible. But she's, again, it was shocking to me, but thinking at 9, that's what they think about before bed.
It's thank you for sharing that. It's really, it's really hard. It's really hard because, as parents and as school staff, we're a piece of the puzzle, but there's a bigger impact out there that children have. So starting this work early with them is just so important. Ready?
When I was a kid, which there was that old phrase, you got to toughen up, right? Yep. Toughen up and take it, right? And in the rest of my life, the following 60 some, there were times whenever that had to happen, and you had to learn that toughen up and just take it. And that's a much more brash statement than saying I think there is a lesson in there, but I'm not sure, because I'm not sure that the toughen up and take it doesn't also promote well, then you can toughen up and take it, right? And so now it enables some of that bullying behavior. And I honestly don't know where that lies. I mean, I've got a couple of kids. I mean, Laura, you look at her cross-eyed and she's crying for Essie cross-eyed. He goes, oh, let me do it too. I mean, it's just, completely opposites, and how to do that's tough.
Yeah, it looks different for different children too, depending on their personalities. I had one who would give it right back and one who would be just devastated, when those words were used. So it's knowing your own children as well. Next slide, please. I kind of talked about this a little bit already, but just a quick background. Is it not cooperating with you, Christy?
Bring the black line.
There we go. So I talked basically about this already, but just that Dr. Clifford brought this work to us. We started the school year with it, and we've each had a total of 3 trainings. Now we're at the phase of starting to roll that out for students. What's that looking like? So we've had time for staff to work, because of course it's going to look different in kindergarten than it looks in 5th grade. Kristen, jump in anytime you want to here. So this program came out of, any of you ever heard of the Southern Poverty Law Center? They launched an organization called Teaching for Tolerance, which has now actually become Learning for Justice. There's a link at the end of the page. You can read more about the work that I've used this as a teacher for many, many years. They have a magazine that they publish. It's really all about equity and inclusion and how we work with some of these big challenges in our community. So this is kind of a quick overview. It's around stereotypes and prejudice, those biased derogatory comments, classroom discussions, and it's really helping too for our staff about, again, and we'll see some examples coming up of empowering them to use the strategies. Kennedy is over there folding up. All of our staff have these little pocket guides, we call them. And literally, like Kristin carries hers around in her badge as a tool to help us know how to use those strategies and empower us to use those strategies. Next slide, please. We'll talk more about those in a minute. So these are the strategies that we've really focused on. Interrupt. I need to stop you right there as you start to hear words coming out of somebody's mouth. And like our friend did yesterday.
Can a kid really do that? And it reminded me that my kid did that.
Yes.
I mean, that's a.
It's huge.
I mean,
Don't forget your.
I have to say that I was really shocked when Laura did that to somebody that size, a fifth grader, right? But a little different. Okay. I mean, she's got a lot of chutzpah. How many kids are actually going to be able to say that? How many kids can actually say that without getting mad in the process?
Yeah.
I think that's a good point too, because it is without that, right? Not being mad or not getting escalated. I think that's such a good point, because part of our work as adults is to practice these without, I need to stop you there without escalating the situation, or almost like without judgment, but just factual. Hey, this isn't okay. And that question, that remind me of when we get to that question, what do you mean by that? Like that can often come with a tone. And so that's just the work of us as adults, because you said it's hard for kids, but as adults, I think it's hard because it's so much in our language to be like, well, hold on, what do you mean by that? And take offense to something. And so the more we model that, it's modeled at home. Other students like your daughter are modeling that. It really helps, but that you're speaking to something that I think is the kind of a nuanced thing with this, to remove
Exactly.
the emotion or the tone from it so that it doesn't feel judgmental.
My kids is an example because I have these two opposite kids in this building. Think of Jesse saying, I need to stop you right there. Having Allie say it, I can see it as a calming thing. Somebody kind of, whoa. If I hear Jesse say that, I hear a fight getting ready to explode, right? I mean, how do you translate that into something that different kids can use, right? So Compass right now is having Jesse do this freeze and thaw thing, right? So when he sees something that he's got to freeze and think about it, right? Trying to get that going. So they're working from that angle where if he stops in that situation and doesn't say that, I need to stop you right there, then that's just going to let the other person escalate. So how does implementation work, I guess, is my question.
Yeah, I think, again, we're working at it with each grade level. So the younger grades might have it in a different way. And these are 4 strategies. You don't have to use all of them. But that interrupt could even just be like, whoa. And that's something I could hear your child say, and so that there is just kind of without being so confrontational. So I think there's different strategies, and then we all have different styles of speaking as well. And so for some people, that I need to stop you there, that feels really direct, and that's not going to be aligned with the way that they show up in the world. And so it could just be a like, whoa, wait a minute, is everything okay here? The interrupt can also be a question, or and that's just one of the strategies. And so for some people, that interrupt could just be like, really, really direct, or it could just be a whoa, or the questioning might be a little bit easier. Like, can you tell me more about why you said that? And that can be a little bit of a gentler approach that maybe wouldn't escalate somebody. And then sometimes like your daughter did, when somebody says something and they interrupt, then another child who maybe isn't as assertive might then feel brave enough to echo.
Exactly. And I just sent we're going to dive more into it, but I just sent a document to Christy, if she's able to pull that up, that when after our last training, we developed this template for each grade band. And I'm just going to we're going to pull up third grade just so you can see, because you make a really valid point. It's going to look different. Speaking up is going to look different for an adult. I mean, we started with adult training, and then as we roll this out to kids, it's going to look very different. If you can't get it, don't worry about it, Christy. Uh-oh. Okay, well, if you get to it, let me know. Otherwise, we can just go on. Do you want to talk any more, Kristen, about any of the rest of these?
No, I just think it's important that we as adults recognize where we might have gaps and be comfortable with calling each other out in that way, and in a gentle way. In fact, it's happened to me, and Dr. Clifford gave an example, but this year, somebody had said something and it was a idiom for something that I didn't really understand, and I had like called back like, oh, I've never heard that. And then they educated me like, oh, actually, I don't think it's something that you should say or, continue to say. And that was a staff member and a parent. And I was like, oh, well, thank you so much, because, there are times where ignorance is just not knowing. And so just having the courage to speak up with each other in our community has been really, I think, really, really good for us.
And kids who have a lot of access to the internet find words. And I've had kids say some very derogatory words, and then when I sit down with them, they don't know what it means. They've just heard it, they've seen it, and they throw this word out without realizing the terrible power. Yeah, it's so that educate piece is really, really, of course, important around here. Next slide, please. So we wanted to do a little activity. If you can think of a time when you heard biased language use, this could be anywhere in your own experience. If you want to reflect on these questions and just think about it within yourself, you don't have to, of course, share, but if you feel moved to share, please feel free to do so. And then think about what was the role of that person and how did the role of that person impact your reaction. Sometimes a person in authority using that kind of language, it's harder for people to speak up depending on their role. Your relationship, were you able to speak up? And if you were, do you recognize any of these strategies that were used? So again, don't feel like you have to, but it's good for us to reflect in our own experiences of how we've worked with that. All right. Words and the power, again, going back to the power of words, kids at our school are just learning. They're learning to read, they're learning to write, they're learning about a language every day. And that's coming from home, it's coming from media, it's coming from their friends. Lots of information is coming in. And then our work is to help them understand what words help and what words hurt. So this is a strategy. We're not using this because we don't even want to bring forward these words to our kids. But I think at the older grades, they're talking more about what are those words that hurt. Somebody brought up an example of when they were in high school, they would say, "That's so gay," without even understanding. It was just what was said, and then somebody interrupted that situation and said, that's a really derogatory comment for a lot of people. So it's just that, and again, being able to do that without the emotion and helping people to learn. That's the bottom line. All right, next slide, please. Kristen, do you want to talk a little bit about this slide? This could be a time when we pass these around. Todd, do you mind passing?
I mean, I think this,
Holding them for us?
yeah, I think this just goes back to just using those 4 key strategies. And I think just first noticing it in yourself is really helpful. And then when you notice it in yourself, you notice it in others. And then practicing it with the people that you feel most comfortable with. And then that can grow. So with us as staff, we practice it with each other. And then with our students, we feel comfortable because they're our students. But just making sure we're just, this actually doesn't say this, so I may not be speaking to the slide, but that we're speaking up every time. Because when you ignore something, you're reinforcing that it's okay. And so just really getting that practice of it can be quick and brief and just have those 4 strategies in the back of your mind. Yeah.
Want to talk a little bit about these? We just handed.
I was going to
Doug's.
mention just really quick that this book is actually up on our website, the PDF version, and I'll make sure it's on the Coffee with the Principal page, link there too.
And then going back to what this slide is actually saying is we're not shaming, we're just educating, and we're just giving students the tools. And the more we do that in a way that's not shaming, the more they can learn to do it with each other.
And these are the
And then-
little,
yeah.
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so those are little pocket guides, and they just have the 4 strategies, and they have some examples. And I think that's really helpful to just have a key phrase when you're learning a new strategy. Even if you think, first pick a strategy, what it would be the most comfortable for me. And for some, that might be echoing. I might have to wait until somebody says something and then say something. But maybe you can educate. That one I think is really good. Questioning, I think is another one that is really easy entry into, like, what do you mean by that? But then use some of those example languages and just have those in the back of your mind. So that has been really helpful in our process to just pick a strategy and then use that language.
Thank you, Kristen. Do you want to go to the next slide, Christy? So this is the work, the training that we've been engaged in and ongoing. It's not a one-time 1-hour training. It's really focusing on our culture here, and it has to start with us as the adults, and then we're bringing that down to the level of our students, again, at that developmentally appropriate place. We, of course, hear a lot from families. I have an email this morning, as a matter of fact, from a parent whose student came home and reported hurtful language. And we really try to use our restorative processes because educating in that way is a really powerful way to support students when they hear directly from a peer. That really hurt me when you said that. So that's been a strategy for us that we use consistently, and trust, building that trust with our children that we are going to respond. We may not be able to always stop it in that moment, but we listen, we care, we try to build that trust that the adults here are here to help you feel safe and connected. Yeah, and sometimes we run into a situation where a family allows that language at home, and then we have to be really clear that, and I've said that to families and children. You may be able to use that language at home, but you may not use that language at school, and give that message over and over again. Anything you want to add to that, Kristen? All right, next slide, please. So this is what you were talking about, Ashley, too, is that balanced approach, right? We want to build resilience too, and empowerment, that words, while we know they do hurt, we also want to build that strength within our students. I don't know, have any of you heard teachers use the size of the problem? Have you heard that language before? You used it in 2nd grade, Kristen. Do you want to speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, and actually, so size of the problem, these actually came from, not from the training itself, but from the work that we've done with the teachers. So they thought, how am I already using this in the classroom, and what does that look like, and how can I incorporate this more? So size of the problem is kind of like, what is your reaction versus to what is the actual situation? And in the younger grades, we have graphics that we use. In my office, I have like storm clouds, like this is an emergency, and it's like thunder and lightning, all the way down to where it's like partly cloudy. And, like, what do we need here in this situation? Is there a real emergency? Is it a real thing that, needs action right now? Or is it something that you can handle on your own? So that's the size of the problem that is already built into our social emotional learning work that we do. And then also empowering them so that they they know the tools that they can do themselves so that they're not reliant on adults. So yes, you can come to us for a problem, and also how can we help you build the tools so that you can do these things on your own, and that's the ultimate outcome.
Yeah, I love this. And we're really practicing using this around this idea of biased language. Is it true? To have that conversation with the child. Well, you don't have to let that in. You don't have to own that. So respond with care, but building that inner strength at the same time is so important. Next slide, please. That understanding of their own power, being able to stand in your own power. We hear that. And it's really so important with kids. Here's an example. Our art teacher, Natasha Zimmerman, is really great at this. Art, believe it or not, is a place where this happens a lot. Kids say, that's ugly. Yours is not as good as mine. Look at you dropped all those pieces in your knitting. And Natasha will say, do you think it's ugly? No, I love it. Well, then you're okay. You get to decide what's true for you. So we use the resilience frameworks that we've already worked with a lot. That includes the size of the problem that Kristin talked about, zones of regulation. Have you all heard that language before? That would be another cool one for us to talk about sometime. So you've probably seen posters or where there's what zone are you in? There's the green, I'm great, I'm ready to go, I'm happy. Red is I'm way up here, I'm so mad. And so helping children to understand their own emotions, because a lot of time it's when they're in the red zone that this language comes out, right? That these hurtful words, because they're so upset and dysregulated, that they're going to use some of that language based on how they're feeling inside. So the more, and I'll say to kids sometimes, when you're in the red zone, don't talk. Just take a deep breath, like we all use, right? Take a deep breath and walk away. Go walk a lap. Go, just pause. So helping them again from that early age to understand. Just a quick question: do you have strategies that you use at home to help children when they're, when they've been said something mean, or their brother sister gets them going? Any strategies that you want to share? If you want to. Anybody has this?
So I hope you don't mind if I digress a little bit here, okay? Because I don't know if you saw, there's a little conversation going on between. And I think bullying situation elementary school significantly different than it is at the ask Kennedy to speak about this. I think there's a huge difference, and the words at the high school can get really, really ugly. Isolate people, okay? Especially if you have any neurodivergence or any sort of different lifestyle type thing. Andy coming here in a red wool pleated dress. There's a variety of things, and people comment on those things. But in my experience with it, where it gets to me, is when it's not the students who are doing it, and where things where it comes from teachers. And I also know it's to a lesser degree here, and that some of the kids actually pick that stuff up. Okay, So how do we get a child to be able to push back on that? Okay, a specific example that I'll cite is last year someone was wearing a Maha hat to school. Offended Kennedy because of all the surrounding implications of that. Trumpism, and I'm sorry if some of you guys like Trump, but I mean, it's just for someone who doesn't like Trump, that's very offensive. And there's there's rules about wearing political garments. And so I actually took that to the principal, and the principal then justified it as that person was a health PE person and therefore had a right to wear it because it was make America healthy again. And no, that's been totally co-opted by a political organization. And I got furious, okay? Because here's the principal now supporting something that is derogatory and offensive to my daughter. And where do you turn? Okay, so I think that there's a lot that has to be done everywhere. I agree that the students a big problem, okay, and that's who you're dealing with most of the time. But then there has to be a remediation point where I go back and I deal with somebody, and I'm treated equitably myself, okay, and I did not feel treated equitably at all in that conversation. How is this being handled with staff? I guess, and with the upper grades, okay, where, you know, ugly.
Well, that's why I'm so glad. Thank you, Todd, for sharing. But that's why I'm so glad that we're looking at this K-12, right? That continuity all the way. And again, you know, this can't be something. And one of the things that I really appreciate about Dr. Clifford, this is a commitment, and it's not going to go away. This work. This is, in fact, do you want to speak about what you're doing?
Yeah, I just want to add that, you know, this framework is actually meant for older grades, and we are having to adopt it down to the lower grades. And so we're doing the work to make it meaningful for our school. But at the upper grades, they're working with the staff similar to how we are. And this work is just starting this year, and we know that those things take time. But also interrupting, hey, that might be offensive. That was something that you did, right? And you spoke up about it. So I think it is going to take time, and we have to continue. We don't just do it this year and then stop. Like, it has to keep being part of our culture. We have to make it part of our culture. And so part of the way that they're doing that is they have their speak up trainings with the staff, and then now they've gotten to the level where they've done the training with their student leaders, and then their student leaders are now training it to the students. And so again, it's kind of meant to start with the staff and then trickle down. In addition to this work, we have another cohort that is called, oh gosh, it's escaped me. It's a hate speech training, and I want to say it's Stop the Hate. I'll find out what it is and then link it, get it to Christy to link. I'm part of the cohort, but we have admin across the district, part of that cohort, and teachers. And that's taken a deeper dive into this work. So this is part of the work, but it's a much broader level, and really calling out and addressing speech, what's tolerated and what's not, and how to interrupt it. And so that is something that's happening with admin and then some teachers as well. So I'm hoping that will just continue to build. It doesn't solve the problem right away, but it's an investment that the district is doing. So that it's a 6-month cohort. So our last one will be after school, ends in June. And that I think has been really empowering for myself. And, you know, it just builds so much more on top of this. And my hope is that will just spread out from, you know, as each building has people doing that work in that school, their school, that it's going to continue to spread.
Maybe a follow-on question to that, because I think education is a huge part of that. Culture shift is immensely challenging to actually measure growth in that area, but is there any sort of mechanism for accountability maybe with staff, like what you were saying, of if there's something that is brought up, is there a way that it's typically addressed, or is there a way to ensure that all staff members are practicing, and then specific consequences might be harsh, but like something that happens if not?
You know, honestly, I don't have an answer for that right now, but I do know that was brought up at the board meeting as like, how are we measuring this? So yes, we're doing all these things, and then how are we measuring the change? How do we, you know, yeah, I don't know, Susie, if you have anything to add to that.
Well, we we do pre and post surveys with staff and students. So we're measuring, so these are some of the questions, like for our students, it's like, do you feel safe at school? So keeping the questions at the level that the children can understand. And so we look at that, and then how are we addressing when we have kiddos who, when we did our first survey in the fall, it's like always, almost always, or never. And when we have kids who note never on any of those questions. We meet one-on-one with them and we continue to work with them, make sure they've got connection. In terms of your question on the staff, we have processes, internal processes that we work with when there's issues that arise. And they go from, you know, conversations, informal conversations to more formalized processes.
What I think would be really nice is if there was some independent body that a parent could go to that's outside of something that could act as an on-island, in-family mediator, not whatever that found solutions, okay, as a mediator, something on island that has some sort of voice to the board or whatever. Okay? Because in the case that I just cited, the person who I reported to, Mr. Patton, is also the person who's supposed to be, I understand, the person who's anti-bullying in the high school. So when he came back with that answer, I was like, great, I have no place else to go. Well, I actually did go to Joe, and Joe pushed me right back down to him. Okay, and I went, this isn't making any sense here, right? So then have no avenue as parents. That frustrates the heck out of me. And in that situation, that was a huge, doesn't do well for Kennedy, who's in that situation, realizing that her dad, who aggressive, slammed into a brick wall, and like, okay, now what do I do? Okay, so that just filters on down. And if we had some independent group that we could go talk to, because even the students, okay, one of the things, and the reason I was asking Kennedy, and the reason I kind of stopped that whole thing, was Moshe said to go back and talk to the teacher himself. And Kennedy said, no way. That's total retribution time. And this guy is just going to come right after me. And whether that's true or not, okay, it's that perception that's the killer, right? So I'm not saying that that person would do it, but that perception is a killer, just a total killer. In the meeting, in the last board meeting, when you guys were talking about the people who had felt that they had a trusted adult, a safe, trusted adult at this talk to, okay, that was a really big eye opener for me. And I hate to say it this way. You guys are really proud of the 70%, but the minute I saw that 70% of the kids have that, my mind went to 30% of the kids don't. That was heartbreaking, totally heartbreaking. Because I had a kid last year who didn't. I think I have a kid this year who doesn't. and so that was real eye opener to me that this is a problem, right? And that how can kids flourish when they don't feel that they have a safe adult to go to?
And and that's the work, right? That's the work, Lauren.
It kind of ties back to, I think, a couple slides ago where you said to think about a situation you've been in. And I've been in a situation where the person was in a power position to the point where I didn't say anything. I waited until it was a doctor. I was not going to question a doctor wearing inappropriate items, in an appointment. So I had to wait and bring it up to a patient advocate. But I think for children as well, knowing that it's not always safe to even challenge their own friends in the situation where they're saying things that are harmful, that it may just be better to wait and tell your parent, tell a teacher, and have that like space, just kind of like you're saying with Kennedy, that maybe a teacher, if it's your teacher, you may not want to say something because you are afraid that it's going to affect your grades and how you're going to be treated in class.
Totally. Yeah. That's that power, differentiation. And that's why having that trusted adult is so important, and why we're working so hard on that, because we have to be the advocates for our children, of course. I mean, I appreciate it so much when a parent calls and says, hey, what's going on, right? Because sometimes we don't know. If it's not like on the playground as an example, if an adult doesn't see it, we won't know unless a parent calls and lets us know. So I welcome that because that's our goal, right? Next slide, please. That's this is the size of the problem process. And I won't go into all of this now, but it's something to look at that you could, look at home. The neat thing about sharing this with all of you is this is language they're hearing at school. So the more that we use similar approaches or processes or language together, thank you, Kennedy. Did that? Okay. Oh, thank you very much. So those key messages for students is around there's small problems, right, that we can fix pretty quickly, and there's big problems when somebody's hurt physically or emotionally, and that this is a big problem when unkind words are being said, and that big problems take time, and that we have processes to help with those. Next slide, please. So this is what we're doing, and this would be cool. I don't know if you can try again, Christy, to pull that thing up just to see if it would work. And maybe if not, Kristen, you could help me with this one. Okay. So I'll talk on this and then we'll see, because I'd really love you to see the template that we're using for each grade band. So these are our next steps that we just identified at our last meeting. And then we had staff go out, we created this template, and each grade band used that template with the similar guiding questions, but looking at it through the lens of a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old. So just give yourself a minute to look at those. We bring in Taproot Theater every year, and that work is focused on upstanding, being an upstander. And that's another way of working with kiddos. And you'll see that if we're able to get this example up around a way to support others who are being unkind languages being. It's an example of ways that children can get the strength to say, that's not okay, right? Again, it can't be a one-time lesson. It has to become part of our daily language. We work to model that, and then using our ORCA code of respect, respecting self, respecting others, respecting our school. Our ORCA code, of course, is safe, respectful, responsible, and kind, but really focusing on this respect piece for that. Kristen, anything you'd want to add from this slide?
No, just that the lessons, the templates that the teachers use to create their lessons, it's an introductory lesson. But there's also this other work that happens implicitly through our SEL curriculum, and that it just needs to continue. So it's not just a one and done, it's every day, finding those moments to interrupt it or to stop it. I think that's the most powerful. In addition to the first introduction, we have to just keep it going.
Next slide.
How far along have you gotten in implementing this? Is this done right now at the teacher level, or has this filtered down to the kids yet?
Not all the way in all the grades, I believe. So it went to the teacher at our last training to develop their lessons, and then finding ways where they could naturally find ways to implement it within their day. But I and Susie, I may be wrong, but I don't know that it's fully integrated into our school yet.
No, the last stage was bringing teachers together as teams to build the grade level introductory lessons. And from there, we're going to continue. And I'm sure next year, Ms. Codda and our other new principal will be continuing that work. Ashley, yes.
So question on that, just so I understand. So it sounded like you were saying integrated. And when I think of integration, just kind of like sporadically woven into our everyday language. When you said introductory curriculum, is it like an actual, we're going to spend 20 minutes to sit down and talk with the kids about this, or?
That's part of the building
okay,
process is what that's going to look like and how we do integrate it into the already existing work. I think our daily caring school communities curriculum, you hear about morning circles in the classroom. That's part of that SEL work that happens every day in the classroom. Our size of the problem work, our zones of regulation. So how are we continuing to integrate? And then even in our literacy, as we're going to talk about in a moment here.
It would be great if you could bring somebody, I don't know how many people will deal with Compass here, but if you could get some of the Compass counselors to at least end what you're doing so they can use that. Some of this stuff is being used Compass, but they're using a different language and the kids.
Yeah, that's a great point,
I mean,
Todd.
it's the whole thing with this freeze and
Yeah.
they're going through with Jesse right now is that's a slightly different language than this. Is he gonna be able to make that
The connection.
translation
Yep.
and connect? And if you could work with Compass on that one, because they're in all buildings.
Yep.
that may help a little bit. I don't know. Just a suggestion.
Great idea. Yep. Yes, Lauren.
That just to kind of add to that. So my daughter, to help her because she does have differences, we've gone through and we talk about, I don't hide what's wrong, like from her, she's part of the picture. And so I've given her words to describe to her friends to say, hey, this is something I really can't control. I have a hard time with my pitch because I have, like low tone or whatever. And she's able to describe it, but her friends have never been introduced to the fact that kids can maybe have differences,
Mhm.
and then they don't believe her. So
Mm,
having kids have the language to receive information that may be new to them and still, like, I don't know how to quite put that, but like if they don't know that there's these disabilities out there that are they've maybe never heard of, they will just be like, oh, that is not true, like,
Wow.
and it's happened. So and maybe include like ways to understand other
I,
kids.
I love that. And it reminds me of the project that you did with
Well, that's
with
why
Jesse.
that's why I
Yeah.
brought my mic live.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to blow my own horn here, but that was the whole point behind
Yep.
the Famous People Project, was to get Jesse to understand that dyslexia is called a disability so that it has a legal standing. Other than that, dyslexia can be there's things he can leverage in that
Yep.
to make it better, right? I'm most likely dyslexic, greater degree than I ever thought. I always knew I had some level of it, but I also strongly feel that that is what's made me successful in business.
Exactly.
And so I think that it's really important for kids to understand that. So that's the whole point behind that.
Yep.
It worked with Jesse. Jesse can talk about dyslexia. You see somebody who has dyslexia and he just like, oh, you have dyslexia too? Oh, wow. Yeah. And you have blue eyes. I've got brown eyes, right? I mean,
Mhm.
it's not something he looks at anymore as a disability. Doesn't look at other kids that way.
Yep.
Right?
That's the power, right?
I don't want to have more ideas and like create things. But Lauren, when you're talking about, these older students now, and I say older, but like older than the grades that I've been teaching here at the school. And it's a little saddening to me because I know how much work is in the kindergarten, first, second grade level. We really this is so much of our work is social emotional learning. I mean, they're learning how to be in the world. And part of that work is bringing those differences through literature, through stories, bringing differences, celebrating differences, acknowledging one's strengths. That is something that I would hope is being built up in those younger grades communities. And it makes me wonder, as curriculum is added on, how do we still make time for that? I know Val Brown does a great job we have these little books that get like, what is it called, where it's like she hangs books on your door for you to read to your class and it's like a surprise. Anyway, I forget what it's called.
Yeah, I
But
do
she
too,
like she like surprised you with a book and then like you read it and then you turn it in. And those books that she's providing us are all centered around equity, usually. Sometimes they're thematic to a season or something, but some of those that have been really powerful. And so I'm wondering how we can make sure that, because in my teaching, there have been some that I have just thought were so impactful. And so I'm just thinking, as you said that, like, how do we make sure that continues through the grades? And then could they come back to those books and the things that they've learned and have a remembrance of that, just so that it doesn't, the focus doesn't just shift to academics. I mean, I know our upper grades teachers are doing a great job, but it just, hearing that is like, oh, it's a little painful because I know there's a lot of work that goes on. So we got to keep it going.
Yeah. Absolutely. I had a parent come in. This reminds me, Todd, of a little bit of your work with Jesse. a parent came in whose child has ADHD and causes him some challenges in the classroom. And they brought this book in called ADHD is My Superpower. And I loved that book so much. I ordered like 4 copies so we could, start handing it out. And it was really beautiful to see kids when that book was read kind of, rise up a little bit like, yeah. And that's the work.
Well, when we put that poster up, there was one child who at the very end says, it's the last frame is what's your superpower. And they had one kid go over there and write his name down and say ADHD and eyes or brown hair or whatever. I mean, he really got it because he took 2 things that are characteristics of him and said ADHD and brown eyes or
Yeah,
whatever.
I love it.
And
Yep.
that was, okay, we got through to that kid
Yep.
and you knew it right then and there. And
Yep.
and I think that's extremely important. And as parents, that project, which was dreamt up by me after reading that book, the Dyslexia Empowerment Plan, I didn't realize I was going to learn from that project. And it wasn't about the people. It was about my attitudes and what I had to change as a parent. Okay. Or I had to sit there and have Jesse, who can't read, do text to speech and tell me what to type in on the screen. Right. And for someone who loves to read, that whole bit of my son may not be able to read, but the text to speech is going to get it to him. And he understands the content and the context of something so that I can type it in for him.
Yeah.
And that's taking this thing that makes it feel like a disability and turns it into, this is a characteristic. And this is why we have accommodations. And this is why we have to have accommodations.
Yep.
And that's not until December of this year. And Jesse's been on an IEP for 6 years. This is the first time I think I've actually had this really major shift in how I looked at the conditions.
Yeah.
It's not just for the kids. It's not just for the parents.
Yep. When I was, this story came in my mind when I was a paraeducator at Langley Middle School, way back in the day. One of the projects that we did is we researched with each child who had an IEP that I worked with. We researched their, I agree with you, disability is such it's the wrong word, but it's what we use in education. And then they got to choose to either present that to their teacher or to a couple peers. And it was so powerful and incredible for them to understand this is who I am. This is what I need to learn most effectively. And there was such an empowerment around that. Yeah, and middle school was a really great age to bring that forward. Let's keep going. Next slide, please. So much great children's literature now out there, and this is definitely for the very youngest grades. Ways that we're working with this, and Val is such an incredible resource for us. And we've talked about a couple other books. If anybody has others that they love, let us know. I think what we could do too, Christy, is link, and I'll get that list from Val because we developed a couple of years ago. Each month we have a kind of a different focus around equity, and we developed a whole list of children's literature. So I could get that to you and link that as well. Would be cool. Next slide, please. So that idea of moving from awareness to action. I don't know if we're going to have time. We're probably not going to have time to do this. Maybe one real quick before we wrap up, just to give you an example if we don't want to go on to the next slide. This is what our staff went through about 5
I
or
didn't know
6
what to
days.
say. During a service project planting trees at a local park, I heard a group of students laughing, and one of them said, "Why are we doing this? Isn't this what the Mexicans are for?" I didn't know what to say.
And then we as a staff talked about each of these were different focus of hurtful and biased language. And it was interesting watching people and their reactions, because what is our natural reaction when you hear something like that is to go, oh, God, and move away from it, right? And so it's working about how do we move into it and build those skills to interrupt or educate or So there's a few more of these if, when you're home. Do you want to go on to the next slides, Christy? Just as our wrap up, but let's skip these.
I
and just
didn't
go
know
to
what
the
to say.
wrap up
Last week at a
slides.
staff meeting,
You could do that one if you want to. I don't know. I think this one is.
I didn't know what to say. Last week at a staff meeting, the principal told us some students from nearby trailer park would be attending a different school next year. Some teachers cheered. I didn't know what to say.
Yeah, so there's an example of when your colleagues say something inappropriate and how we would deal with that. So anyway, there's a series of those.
I didn't know what.
If you just skip to the next slides that keep going.
I didn't know.
One more. So this is just some wrap up, that experiencing discomfort, staying engaged, speaking your truth. And sometimes you don't get closure, right? Sometimes you say something, you interrupt, and people will say, and you have to be able to accept that, but know that you stood in your own truth as you those steps to interrupt or educate or question. Next slide, please. Again, this is, the adult side of things, but how we can continue as a community to model this work, because that's the key piece, right? Our children are just little sponges for everything that adults around them say and do. And so our work and our modeling is what's most important. Next slide, please. So this is kind of just our little wrap up and how we're continuing this work with our staff. Anything, Kristin, that you would add? There's a link if you want to learn more about the Learning for Justice site. Comments?
No, just that this work is ongoing, and then that other district training, that cohort that we're doing is going to tie into this and just make it a little more explicit and give teachers, I think, more tools, because I think this is a great starting point, and it brought the conversation to our staff and it gave them tools that they can use and then implement in their classrooms. And there's more work to be done. And we're doing that work, and I'm excited about this other cohort because we have time during that cohort. Sarah Gillette is part of it with me as well, and so we're focused specifically taking that information and how can we make this relevant at the elementary level. So I'm really grateful for her partnership in that, and then looking across elementary, like, okay, what's meaningful to a kindergartner may not be meaningful to a fourth grader, and so expanding on this and making it really explicit to teachers and students so the language becomes part of our culture.
Final comments, thoughts?
I've got a question and relatively long one for such a short question. And as parents, what can we do to help? I don't mean by that is imbue these concepts at home, okay? Because I think some of us already do that. I want to know how I can help the school, okay? Just wrote an email to someone in the school. Look overloaded. How can I help? Can I come in and volunteer? Can I do something for you? Right? You guys see me, you especially, because you seem to be on the route, at noon today or 1 o'clock today, I'll be sitting out there with my favorite friend and we'll be doing some work. And I feel that is helping out Dubendorf and taking a load off of her so she can work with other people. How can we help make this happen? I mean, I think of like the Famous People Project, which was to boost up Jesse, and then it kind of exploded out into something much bigger. What can we do to help the school directly?
Well, I'll just say, and then I'd love to hear what you have to say, but what you're doing, showing up, all of you, you show up, and that's the number one thing, because we cannot do it alone. Absolutely can't do it alone. So being in the school, participating in these kind of activities, listening to the videos if you can't make it, just that's the number one thing for us, I think, as educators, because it's overwhelming, right? Because not all children have parents who are advocates and can be here and can be a part of this process. So for me, that's the number one thing.
And I think knowing your teacher and I mean, I see everybody in this room. It's like, okay, like I've seen you in classrooms. I know you're around. But I think going to your teacher and asking like, what can I do to help? Because I think sometimes teachers like want to like, I have it, everything's fine, or at least that's my personality type. Like I've got it all. So I think just going to them and saying, hey, how can I help you? And then as we are rolling out these and they're communicating to you that these lessons are happening, if you're interested in this work, that would be a great thing to say, hey, what can we do? And then as we are working on this ongoing work that Sarah and I are doing with that district cohort, if there's things that come up like physical, you know, like, hey, Todd, we're going to need you to help laminate or whatever, I'll put it out there because it's nice to know that there are people that want to support us in this work. And then, you know, just your presence here is great. And then using that language at school. If you hear something, say something or tell the teacher if you're not comfortable, you know, like, oh, that might have been offensive. I'm going to let Ms. Dubendorf know. I think that's huge. And then the thing that you do that is really helpful to me is your report. That's one of the biggest things.
And I'll let you know that that is extremely difficult. Okay, because I feel like a tattletale every time.
I know, and I
open
told you
up.
you would, but you're not tattling to get someone in trouble. If I don't know something, I can't help change behavior, and so I know it's uneasy, and I just want to say that I appreciate it. Just let me know, and so that's my biggest message. Like, you know, we can't help change them if we don't know. So I appreciate when you do it because I know it's hard each
I
time.
do think there's other people who want to get involved and want to help and don't know how or don't feel comfortable. Had a conversation with the person at 10 o'clock. Acting that way. Okay. Know that they want to help, but they don't know how. And they're coming to me to ask me how. It's like, oh, you know.
We still have a volunteer coordinator too for people who are just not sure what they want. And Melissa Fields is our volunteer coordinator, volunteer at sw.wednut.edu. And she does a wonderful job. We've got, as an example, a community member here, no kids. She just wanted to she was nervous, wanted to find a way to help. And Melissa worked with her and found like just the right spot. So I encourage you, of course, always to one of us too, but we do have that volunteer at sw.wednut.edu. All right, I think Cassie might be waiting for this room. So I think we should wrap it up, but thank you all so very much. It means so much to us, you being here. So thank you. Really appreciate you all. Have a lovely rest of your day. I'm hoping we're going to get our new principal in to do one of the coffee with the principals before the end of the year. So we're going to try. We'll keep you posted. And congratulations to Ms. Codda as our new assistant principal officially.
The official. Thank you.